Hello, Sherry. Good to know PD and Robin are here. We'll wait for another 30 seconds and see who else signs in, and then we'll go. Okay, it's been 2 minutes. I've been online and was a little late getting the reminder out tonight, so that's maybe my fault that people aren't tuned in, but maybe they'll show up as we move along. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 37 this evening and looking at the beginnings of what is primarily the Joseph narrative. And this is the dominant theme of the text for the rest of the book of Genesis. There is some departure, especially next week. We'll look at chapter 38 and we'll see Judah sadly taking the forefront of the story for one chapter only. And we'll be glad to be rid of him after that chapter, I think, at least for a while. And towards the end of the book, there's a lot of national, I guess you could say, housekeeping. The people of Israel, the prophecies about Jacob, from Jacob towards his sons, and what that means on a national level, not just in their own personal lives or whatever. It'll be a we haven't really gone into the names of the sons yet and the meanings of the names of the sons, and we'll stop there for a while and kind of get into that kind of Bible nerdy stuff at that time, but it does have importance and relevance, and it does help us kind of understand, and I think these chapters around here also kind of explain some of the surprising developments in the history of the nation of Israel. Why, for one thing, good to see Tammy and Ray here. Why kind of the expected or normal order of succession, which is the oldest child being the preeminent heir, why that doesn't happen here. It hasn't happened yet, so it's perhaps not too surprising. By yet, I mean in the history of the nation of the people of Israel, the oldest son has been, for one reason or another, passed over so far, and that continues in this story. And we've already seen a little bit of a reason why. I think this passage, or this story, this narrative of the Joseph narrative, really resonates with people today, and sometimes maybe not for the reasons that they think it does, and it maybe doesn't say exactly about Joseph what they think it says, but it does say that God works providentially, and that's what we see more in the life of Joseph than miraculous actions by God, or things happening outside of the realm of what we would normally consider to be possible. I think if you added up the odds on everything that happened to Joseph and how it started and how it turned out, mathematically it would be impossible. But each step along the way, People make choices and people do things, and there are consequences for those things. And God takes those choices, but also the consequences of those things, to bring about his intended purposes, not just for Joseph as an individual, but for the nation of Israel as a whole, including the brothers who are not portrayed all that favorably. So, if you look at Abraham again, the emphasis of Abraham really is a promise kept when it seems like it cannot be kept, when it is totally impossible. Sarah conceives and gives birth to Isaac. The Isaac narrative is pretty brief and really just a transition from Abraham to Jacob. Then the Jacob narrative is God finding favor amongst humans in conflict. And when you figure in the role of Esau in that, you see that even the one that isn't found to be favorable is also still remembered and blessed. I think you could say the Abraham narrative is primarily about humanity and God working their deal out, humans working their deal out with God. And then Jacob's narrative is primarily about humans struggling with God and each other. And maybe the emphasis for Jacob, at least, on duking it out with your uncle and your brother and all the other people trying to take things from you, and the means and methods you employ to try to make your own way in the world. And so it's more of a horizontal story, while the Abrahamic narrative is primarily vertical between Abraham and God. There is verticality certainly in the Jacob story, and horizontal implications in the Abraham story as well. But primarily, Abraham is about unlikely and even impossible promises being kept, and then Jacob is about God working through conflict amongst humans, in favoring one, disfavoring the other, but not forgetting the disfavored. Joseph is more about God working providentially over the course of time to bring about his purposes, even when people act in a way that he would not normally want them to act. It's good to see Wally and Thelma here, and hope Thelma is continuing to recover. So the story of Joseph, for people who may struggle to believe some of the more fantastic claims of the Bible, some of the more impossible stories, and they're when I say impossible, it doesn't mean they didn't happen, because with God all things are possible, but impossible in terms of our understanding of science, physics, geography, geology, all of those things, biology. The people struggle with that sometimes. They struggle, even if they love what Jesus has to say and how he lived his life and the messages and the idea or the concept. Maybe they struggle with some of the miracles of Jesus, and they certainly struggle with the whole world being flooded, the world being created in 6 days, and some of the other kind of monumental accomplishments of God. The ones that boggle our mind. How could this possibly be true? And if they struggle with that story, that narrative, maybe they become a little too jaded with that. And maybe they're a little tired of the constant fighting and elbowing and sharp dealing that normal human life brings. They're tired of the stories of the impossible that they just maybe have a hard time believing, and then tired of the constant bickering and fighting amongst humans. Here comes the Joseph story, where it doesn't depend so much on God acting miraculously. Very little of that, actually. It's much more about God bringing redemption to flawed human activities and accomplishing His will through them. And it's a presentation of God that may be a little more acceptable and digestible to a post-enlightenment and now post-modern world. I say that post-modern can mean a lot of things, and it does include a lot of times some embracing of the spiritual world, not just the physical, but also the metaphysical. Hi, Nell. Good to see you, and we're looking forward to seeing everybody on Sunday. Joseph's story, and it entails kidnapping, being sold into slavery, an attempted seduction, doing a good job and being rewarded for it. And some of the things that happen are unlikely, but certainly possible. We all heard these unlikely success stories. The person that started out a business with $5 in his pocket and became a billionaire, or something like that. We know of unlikely success stories, and to some extent, that's what we see in Joseph. We see this prince ripped from the house of privilege and dragged down into the mud, into the lower level of humanity, and rising up because of his great character and his, he was noble born, and his goodness was ingrained in him, and he was rewarded for it ultimately. And that is a big part of the Joseph story. That is, this, in a sense, Joseph foreshadows particularly the passion of Jesus, the betrayal, the imprisonment, the false witnessing against him. There's things about this that foreshadow the passion of Jesus Christ. There is some important differences. Jesus is foreshadowed by Abraham as well, and is foreshadowed certainly by Isaac, and every now and then a little bit by Jacob, but Jacob is kind of his own guy. Okay, so enough talk about all this. Let's go ahead and get into the text. We'll look at verses 1 through 11 of Genesis chapter 37. So Genesis chapter 37, verses 1 through 11. Now Jacob lived in the land where his father had sojourned, in the land of Canaan. These are the records of the generations of Jacob. Joseph, when he was 17 years of age, was pasturing the flock with his brothers while he was still a youth by his father's wives. And Joseph brought back a bad report about them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a vari-colored tunic. And his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, so they hated him and could not speak to him on friendly terms. Then Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Please listen to this dream which I have had. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf rose up and also stood erect, and behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf." Then his brothers said to him, "Are you actually going to reign over us, or are you really going to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Now he had still another dream, and related it to his brothers, and said, "Lo, I have had still another dream, and behold, all the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." He related it to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have had? Shall I and your mother and brothers actually come to bow ourselves down before you to the ground?" His brothers were very jealous of him, but his father kept the sayings in mind. Okay. We see this fraternal animosity. We see the hatred between brothers, born of jealousy, born also of parental favoritism. Isaac is not shy, really, or excuse me, Jacob is not shy about showing the world that Joseph is his favorite son. He dons on him a kind of I guess what you could call a royal proclamation robe. That this is an enthronement robe. This is the son in whom I'm well pleased. This is the son who will be my primary heir, and this is the one that will be the legacy that I leave behind. And since he is the youngest of the sons at this point, that is a cause, other than Benjamin, who has been born but is still very young. Among the sons that are out working and doing things, the adult sons, this is a source of tremendous resentment and jealousy. And that from that point, Joseph makes things a lot worse. That's the thing. This is how you see Joseph is how you choose to see him. My mother used to have to tell me a lot that you don't have to tell everyone everything you know. And Joseph has these dreams that reveal greatness ahead of him and submission to one extent or another by his elder brothers and by even his parents. And you can also look at the sun and moon, maybe in the stars and all that, some of that being Egypt and their pagan religion. It was received by the people he tells it to the first as applying to them. So staying with that kind of interpretation of it, it may be true. It was true. It was the dreams that he had. But, Joseph is a young man, he was still a boy. I guess you could say the scriptures call him a youth. And young men are not known for their discretion. Some of them have it, but not very many. And sometimes they're not very self-aware and they don't read the room too well. And when everybody already hates you because you're the favored, maybe it's not the time to remind them exactly how favored you are and you will be. That doesn't really bring the family together. That doesn't promote harmony and unity. I'm not sure there was too much Joseph could have done because the bitterness, the resentment was born of the actions, the choices, and the words of Jacob as much or more than it was Joseph. But Joseph doesn't, if Jacob builds a fire, Joseph, by telling these dreams, is just throwing some big logs on the fire. So there's no upside in the relationship that he has with his family for telling the story. And there is obviously a bit of a dark side for a downside for it. And would anyone want to hear that from a little brother? I mean, I am both a little brother and I have a little brother, and my older brother wouldn't have liked hearing me say something like this, and I would not have liked to hear it from my little brother. So this is not a way to promote family unity. But again, Genesis, as we've mentioned a few times already, is to a large extent a collection of brother stories, the struggle of brothers to live together. Ishmael and Isaac were not able to live together, although they were brothers. Jacob and Esau were not able to live together, even though they're brothers. And the dysfunction and the disunity within Jacob's family and his children would normally have been resolved by the brothers kind of spreading out and going their own way. Here's Reuben, you take yours, and Judah and Simeon, and all you guys all go out and stake your own claim, and you'll have a really good head start with a portion of family wealth, and you just kind of get away from each other and build your own lives. And that's kind of the American way of dealing with this type of thing, isn't it? If you don't really enjoy being at home, you don't like being around your parents or your brothers and sisters, wait till you turn 18 and then go out and make your own life. and maybe you'll learn to appreciate what you had to begin with. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll make exactly the life you want for yourself, or maybe you'll find that you have to compromise a little bit, and all of a sudden the folks back at home weren't quite so crazy. But that's not the future God has in mind for Israel. God wants these brothers and their descendants to dwell together in harmony and dwell together in unity. And the natural or expected way of dealing with this family tension is not available for God if he wants to accomplish his purpose. He's got to get these people to live together. They have to dwell together, and this makes it a bit more challenging. This makes it something that the disunity between the brothers is even more important, and it shows God accomplishing a relative unity with the tribes, their descendants, as the greatness of God's accomplishment, because he's able to bring that about. So it's not a deal breaker for God, even though it would normally have been a deal breaker for the people involved. Another thing that's not a deal breaker is this kind of impetuousness or impertinent behavior or discussion by Joseph. Jacob does not respond real favorably to it either, but notice that Jacob takes it. He responds. He's not happy, but then he takes it and he kind of takes it inside of himself and he dwells with it a little bit. And this is something else. When Jacob's daughter Dinah is raped at and by Shechem, he doesn't respond with the anger and the revenge motivation that maybe we would expect, and maybe his sons wanted him to have. And certainly some of his sons did respond with that motive. And he's not happy with his sons either. He takes both the rape of his daughter and what would have been in that context, in that understanding, a disproportionate response. I'm not saying it was disproportionate. I'm saying they would have seen it as disproportionate. A disproportionate response. He takes his unhappiness with both of those things, and he kind of internalizes them and dwells with them and lets them work on him. And here he takes this impudence by his son, and in a culture that greatly values honoring parents, he takes this impudence by his son and just kind of balks at it a little bit at first, but then just swallows it and lets it work on him, keeps it in mind. And it's kind of reminiscent, foreshadows a little bit the statement by Luke in chapter 2 of his gospel about Mary. He makes the statement a couple of times that when Mary sees people responding to or prophesying about, and when Jesus goes to the temple and stays there when he's a youth and they leave and they have to come back and get him and all that, she's upset. She's not happy at that point. All these things are going on, though, and people are saying all these wonderful things about her son, and she treasures them in her heart. She takes them in and lets them work on her and shape her. It's not exactly what she wanted. She didn't have the life she dreamed of growing up. She has a different life that God has given her, and it involves this probably a difficult son, a wonderful son, a tremendous blessing, but also it wouldn't be easy to raise the Son of God. And she takes all of these things and internalizes them, just as Jacob here is taking all of these things and internalizing them and letting them work on him a little bit. And sometimes bad things happen to us in life, and a lot of bad things are about to start happening to Joseph. And lashing out, seeking our justice, seeking our revenge is perhaps a normal human response to that event, to those things occurring. But if we can have patience, if we can leave room for the wrath of God, if we can absorb some of these slights and insults and hurts, they can really work on us and shape us. I'm not trying to, it doesn't make the wrong right. It doesn't mean when God redeems the poor choices of others, that doesn't make them wise choices. That just shows the power of God for redemption. So if someone is hurting you, I'm not trying to tell you you just have to take it and internalize it. I would need to know a whole lot more about the story. But if you can look back at your life and see the hurts that have come your way and perhaps how they have helped you become a more godly person, how they've shaped your life, perhaps mindful also of the hurts you've dealt out too, because we have all hurt people and we've all been hurt by people. So if we can take our hurts that come our way and be reminded of the hurts that we have administered ourselves, and we're healthy enough, we're still in a safe enough and healthy enough place to process these things, they can have ultimately a redemptive role in our lives. And that's what's happening to Jacob. Jacob is a wealthy, powerful man, and when bad things come his way, they do not normally threaten his very existence or his ability to feed himself or his family or anything like that. He is he is being hurt while in a position of power. And in that position, he's able to, as the paterfamilias, the father of the family, he's able to process these things and grow from them, to keep these things internalized and deal with them, to dwell with some difficulty, not have to have life smooth and easy, everything going your way, even when you're in a position of power. If you've been around wealthy, powerful people today, a lot of times they expect everything to absolutely go their way. They're paying for everything. They want to get exactly what they're paying for. And when they hit a bump in the road, they don't know how to deal with it. And those of us without a lot of wealth and power, we've had to learn how to function and survive in the world in the absence of wealth and power, and roll with the punches a little bit, to borrow from a boxing cliche. Okay, let's look at verses 12 through 24. Then his brothers went to pasture their father's flock in Shechem. Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send you to them." And he said to him, "I will go." Then he said to him, "Go now and see about the welfare of your brothers and the welfare of the flock, and bring back word to me." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. A man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field, and the man asked him, "What are you looking for?" He said, "I'm looking for my brothers. Please tell me where they are, pasturing the flock." Then the man said, "They have moved from here, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. When they saw him from a distance, and before he came close to them, they plotted against him to put him to death. They said to one another, "Here comes the dreamer. Now then, come and let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits, and we will say, 'A wild beast devoured him.' Then let us see what will become of his dreams." But Reuben heard this and rescued him out of their hands and said, "Let us not take his life." But Reuben further said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit that is in the wilderness, but do not lay hands on him, that he might rescue him out of their hands and restore him to his father." So it came about when Joseph reached his brothers that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the very colored tunic that was on him, and they took him and threw him into the pit. Now the pit was empty, without any water in it. Okay. Excuse me. So we see that this resentment that the brothers had towards Joseph was not just a little, "Oh, my kid brother bugs me." Sometimes it was very real and very deep and very powerful, and it motivated them on a course that was perhaps originally intended to be murderous. They wanted to kill Joseph. And excuse me, this is a sign, I think, of some importance to us today in looking at dysfunction in families. We acknowledge that all families are dysfunctional at some level, but it does need to be addressed at times. There is a potential for real harm to come out of it. Life and death kind of hang in the balance sometimes. And that's where this is at. They hate Joseph badly enough to kill him. And it starts with their father's favoritism. And guess what he's wearing? He's wearing the very sign of their favoritism. He's wearing his little coat of many colors. And that just, his rainbow coat made them very angry. And they were ready to kill the dreamer. But in a sense, you could say, kind of backing it up symbolically, the dream is more powerful than the dream killers. The people who want to kill a dream cannot find the resolve, cannot find the commitment to actually kill the dream. The dream lives. And it's also kind of in the we see Reuben perhaps trying to redeem himself. We know that Reuben committed adultery with his father's concubine Bilhah in Genesis 35. So Reuben acts here in a way that's very surprising. God uses a surprising character to spare the life of Joseph, in that Reuben is this bad boy, this naughty boy, who is now intervening. Perhaps it is an attempt by Reuben to atone for his misdeed, but if you keep in mind the political significance of what Reuben did, Reuben realizes that the adultery was a mistake, but instead of being at the very bottom of the list, if Reuben can extricate Joseph from this danger, restore him to Jacob, Reuben will be the hero in his father's eyes, at least as he sees the rest of these 9 sons who are plotting to kill Joseph. So, there's a lot of ways to, I guess, comprehend this story, and they're not all particularly good. But Reuben is, I see I'm not getting a really good internet connection. I'm just going to go and hope it works out. Reuben is perhaps trying to redeem himself, but more likely this is just additional political maneuvering where he's trying to come out ahead of as many of his brothers as he can. And the more powerful, the greatest threat to his ascendancy, to being the number one heir, of course, is Joseph, and he's sparing Joseph's life, but he is improving his odds in regard to the other sons, and who knows what will happen down the road. So anyway, that's kind of that part of the story. Is there's a lot of mystery there. The guy that Joseph encounters, who is Joseph talking to there? We don't really know, but he gets him out of Shechem, which is an important town. And already, of course, that's where Dinah was raped, and the brothers got their revenge, to another place. And that is where Joseph is captured. And ultimately, we'll see sold into slavery by his brothers. Let's go ahead and finish the text. And hopefully this is going through. I don't really know. So verses 25 through the end of the chapter, verse 36. Then they sat down to eat a meal, and as they raised their eyes and looked, behold, a caravan of Ishmaelites was coming from Gilead, with their camels bearing aromatic gum and balm and myrrh, and on their way to bring them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it for us to kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and not lay our hands on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. Then some Midianite traders passed by, so they pulled them up and lifted Joseph out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. Thus they brought Joseph into Egypt. Now Joseph returned to the pit. Now Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit. So he tore his garments. He returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is not there. As for me, where am I to go?" So they took Joseph's tunic and slaughtered a male goat and dipped the tunic in the blood. And they sent the varicolored tunic and brought it to their father and said, "We found this. Please examine it to see whether it is your son's tunic or not." Then he exclaimed it and said, "It is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." So Jacob tore his clothes and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. Then all his sons and all his daughters arose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, "Surely I will go down to Sheol in mourning for my son." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, Pharaoh's officer, the captain of the bodyguard. So, again, we see that God's plans for redeeming what's going on here are at work. God is not going to allow Reuben to fully redeem himself in this context. His deliverance, God uses it up to a point and says, "Okay, you spared Joseph's life. That's all you're going to do." Judah is used now, and we'll see more of Judah next week, but Judah is used now to push the plot forward, and ultimately God uses Judah's conniving to set Israel, the nation of Israel, on the path to Egypt, from which God will lead them out in the Exodus. But by selling Joseph to the Midianites, who are Ishmaelites, who are bound for Egypt, God has providentially brought about Israel's entrance into the land of Egypt. He's put them there. And Joseph is the forerunner of that. He's also cut off Reuben's maneuvering, whatever plot. He's now put Reuben back down with the rest of the brothers. Reuben has helped save Joseph's life, but Reuben cannot tell anybody he helped save Joseph's life. He can't tell his father, "Joseph is alive. I saved him." He is as guilty. He's right there in the plot with the rest of them. And they are, tied together in this conspiracy. They take this article of clothing that was a sign of favor and choice and calling that Jacob has given Joseph, and they use that article of clothing, that enthronement garment, and use it to deceive their father, telling him that Joseph is dead. They don't say it, but they put that story. Certainly, that's the conclusion that Jacob draws from it. The deception is effective. Jacob goes into full mourning mode. He's lost his son, his favorite son. The son in whom he is well pleased has been ripped to pieces by wild animals. That's kind of a very harsh fate to accept for your favorite son. And they convince him with this garment. That may sound unfair, that may sound cruel, that may sound really ironic when you think about it, because Jacob, when he deceives his father Isaac and steals the birthright, the blessing from Esau, he puts on Esau's clothing and makes Isaac think that he is Esau when he is in fact Jacob. So this trick that he played on his father is flipped around and played on him now. Not exactly the same terms, but Jacob is no shrinking violet when it comes to tricking people, to being deceptive. He has no problem doing that on his way up. And now, as his sons are on their way up, they trick him. The trickster gets tricked. Meanwhile, Joseph is sold in Egypt. He is alive. God has preserved him. He has preserved the existence of Joseph, if not the quality of life. And there is these little signs that God is still looking out for Joseph. God is making sure that he goes to a place where he can be blessed in the household of Potiphar. We will see soon, not next week, but soon, that Joseph is delivered from one dysfunctional family situation of which he's a part. And that's the way dysfunction usually works. Everybody's a little bit dysfunctional. Joseph is a part of the dysfunction. And now he's in another dysfunctional family situation. And once again, in this dysfunction, while dysfunction is normal, everybody's got it. Life and death hang in the balance. And certainly Joseph's life has hung in the balance now twice with family dysfunction. And we'll look at that more in a couple of weeks. Next week, we'll look at a story that has a lot more to do with the Mosaic Law than you might imagine, even though we're predating it from quite a bit in terms of chronology, but it is understood. It should be understood, and it is certainly the basis for perhaps some of the Mosaic laws, and it would be understood. The actions, the choices would be understood through the lens of the Mosaic Law very clearly. And that's chapter 38. And we'll look at that next week. Let's have a prayer, and hope you have a good rest of your evening. Father, we come to you this evening thankful for all the blessings, thankful for your provision, thankful for the times you intervene and make the impossible occur, and also thankful for the times that you take what is possible and use it to bless us. Help us see that the blessing is not just for our own welfare, but to help accomplish your purposes in the world. Help us be willing servants of yours to bring about your will on earth as it is in heaven. In the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in or watching this video anytime, and I love you and the Lord loves you.